Good morning, good day, good evening. This is Steve Garrison. I'll be leading this webcast with my colleagues, Nahal Contractor. We're going to talk about ransomware strategies in 2021. It's quite a hot topic. Quite a lot of issues are still out there. The SolarWinds phenomenon is something we will touch upon today because it's also in the news. But the reality is we're trying to help you understand what we think has changed since SolarWinds. And the tagline below the main title, "Are you using the right tools?" is part of our discussion today. So let's go to the first slide, Nahal, and set up some terminology. So this idea of insider threats is now, I think, on everybody's mind because SolarWinds was a trusted part of people's supply chain, and yet it became a threat attack vector. And so now the question is, who can I trust? Employees, board members, part of your supply chain, as I just mentioned, contractors. So Nahal, give us some insights on how to define that term so we're on the same page before we go deeper into the webcast.
Yeah, absolutely, Steve. Many threats are currently going undetected because you just don't have a 360-degree view. We have a lot of siloed tools that just don't give us complete correlated visibility.
That's great, Nahal. So it sounds like we're dealing still with the issues of separate tools and separate data streams leading to gaps or blind spots.
Correct.
All right, let's take a look at the next slide and see what other people are saying. In particular, Forrester, one of the leading analyst companies out there, I'm sure everybody's aware of Forrester. They recently issued a report on insider threats and noted that this year they're predicting 30% of threats will be insider breaches, and that's up from 8% last year. That's still quite significant. And again, I think that's one of the reasons we're hearing so much about this concept of ransomware, because at the end of the day, the idea of these hackers is to get critical assets and steal them from you and then force you to pay them back. Let's look at the next slide, Nahal. Take a little bit deeper dive here into why is this so difficult, right? What are people missing? Another data point is that 90% of insider threats go undetected for quite some time. So Nahal, is this all about silos? What are we all missing out there?
Steve, silos have a lot to do with it, but let's take a quick step back why this has increased over the last year. Clearly, we have a lot of, our work habits have changed. Where we work from has changed. Many people are working remotely, if not all people right now. So the threat landscape has changed. Lots of folks are using VPN to dial into their corporate network. So it's no longer just protecting you at the perimeter. Most of those tools that are protecting you or giving you visibility are at the perimeter. And when you're coming in via VPN, you may sometimes be bypassing those perimeter tools.
So the perimeter is now not the goal. It's everywhere.
Absolutely.
Yeah, everywhere.
You need to have visibility everywhere.
Yeah, that's a key theme, Nahal. And I think a lot of our prospects and customers and partners use logs as the basis. Let's take a look at the next slide and see how that folds into the future, this idea of threat hunting. So there's two issues with threat hunting. We'll talk about logs secondly, but first, how about team architecture, right? Teams are used to working on specific tools and then talking to each other and sharing insights and asking if, hey, I'm seeing something over here. What about over there? What are you seeing? What are your thoughts on that, Nahal? What are people doing out there that you can share with the audience today?
Yes, Steve, many people are looking at the tools and their visibility from a different perspective now. Let's talk about threat hunting for a little bit. Threat hunting, there's multiple ways of threat hunting. Threat hunting, if you look at historically, most folks did it with SIM tools. You'd have a lot of logs that are aggregating into a single tool, and then you would go ahead and look for specific things, right? Look for writing queries, looking for certain attributes inside your logs. The landscape's changed quite a bit today. Logs just aren't enough. You can't just find everything just from getting syslogs. So you need tools that are specifically there to look for security events. Having security in a mind frame, right? Looking for security threats. One other way of doing it is with machine learning. Looking for security threats with traditional tools, a lot of it's based on things that have happened, signatures. Machine learning allows you to find anomalous activity. Machine learning allows you to find not only anomalous activity from a network perspective, but also from a user perspective, as well as an asset perspective. So we're going to create a baseline with many different vectors. And we're going to look for those peaks and valleys, something that changes from the normal.
That's an interesting point, Stom. Basically, not even having to know what normal is a key. Let's take a look at the next slide, because we're going to challenge this idea of logs again. Again, there's a lot of surface out there that becomes an attack surface, right? You've got cloud, you've got SaaS, you've got the applications themselves now very clearly highlighted by SolarWinds. You've got the network. You've got your traditional firewall and IDS pumping out lots of logs. So Snehal, you touched upon it, but help the audience understand, why aren't these logs enough?
Yeah, logs are valuable, Steve. They're always going to be valuable. They provide you visibility. The challenge many folks are having today is having to go look at those logs from an individual tool perspective. I've got logs from a firewall that's given me visibility to maybe the firewall statistics. I've got logs from a sandbox tool that's given me visibility to malware. I've got logs from an IDS tool that's giving me visibility to exploits. Each one of those are individual siloed products giving you individual logs. So I'll give you an example, Steve, is if I receive an event that says a malware was downloaded, you'd say, okay, great, I've identified it. But what's really important to you, what did that malware do? Did it go exploit a server that had a vulnerability on it? Did it eventually go and establish a command and control session, which is maybe your firewall would have told you that, right? And your IDS tool would have told you about the exploit. So now I've got individual tools giving me individual events. How does an analyst go and correlate all of those together and say, yes, I did have a compromised host in my network, and it did exfiltrate my network with data?
That's quite a complex process, Snehal. I can see why that's going to be a problem for a lot of people. If you don't have the people, you're going to need time. If you don't have time, you're going to get breached. I think it's time to actually, no pun intended, to jump into the demo and show people what this looks like from a security operational perspective on our platform. And we'll take questions and throw them to Snehal as they come. Snehal, take us away for the demo here.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Steve. So as I mentioned, correlation is one of the most important things that a SOC or an analyst would do to find a critical threat in their network. People are doing that today, whether you realize it or not. It just takes you days and days to correlate all of these different events. So I want to show you a demo of why correlation is very, very important. So let's take a look at, first and foremost, I want to show you our dashboard here. The dashboard's goal is to identify the most critical security events that are happening in your network and to address them, okay? On the left-hand side here, I've got my most critical security assets. You can see the many different security events that are related to each one of the assets here. On the right-hand side, I've got the most critical security event that's happening in my network. Here you can see I've got ransomware, and I can click on more information and get additional evidence behind that alert. In the middle, I've got the cybersecurity kill chain arc, which, first of all, you've got detections across the entire kill chain: reconnaissance stage, delivery stage, looking for exploits, things that are being installed on your critical servers, command and control, and actions and exfiltration stage. This allows you to go and identify which ones I need to go address first. Clearly, I've got actions and exfiltration stage, which is data leaving my network, and I've got 12 critical events there. I need to go address those first. So this is one way, is a platform using security detections across all of your data sources at a network level, data from your servers, data from all of your syslog messages, so integration across your entire environment, as well as getting data from your SaaS applications, Office 365, Google Suite, Azure, and all that. So bringing all of the data in, normalizing that data, and having different tools, as you can see here, look for security threats across that common data set. as well as looking for anomalies using machine learning. Okay, so this is identifying critical security events. Let's talk about threat hunting. Okay, the one thing I want to take a look at something that's been on mine and what we've learned recently. Let's say you woke up and you're looking at the news and you see SolarWinds had a major threat. First thing you're probably going to do is go into your network and find all servers that have SolarWinds installed on it. So I would easily come in here and look for the word SolarWinds across all of my assets. Steve, I've identified a server that has SolarWinds installed on it, and you can see here's the version of SolarWinds. Okay, so I can go back and see, okay, I found a server that's got SolarWinds installed on it. Has the server been compromised? Is this something I should take a look at? How would you do it traditionally? I may have to go to various different tools in my my network to find out if this has been compromised. How about if I give you a panoramic view? A panoramic view will show you, here's the SolarWinds server in the middle. Okay, so that's the server in the middle. Because I have all data coming from my entire environment into a single platform, I'm able to also have all of those different security detections in the same platform. So here you can see I've had a user logged in, an external user logged into my my server here at an anomalous time from an anomalous location. Now, you could have gotten that event from your UBA tool, but would that have signified that this is a critical event? It would have been like, that's interesting. Here's what I have next. I've got that same server logged into my Azure Active Directory, and they created themselves a user. Okay, so how would I have gotten that event? Well, maybe you would have logged into Azure Active Directory and saw your logs over there and see that they created a user. Okay, that's another moment, right? Is that critical? What happens next here, I've got visibility to, is I've got lateral movement now from that server. That server had an RDP brute force attack to this server. Matter of fact, they tried to axe that server, which they've never done before. So you can see I've got a user asset access anomaly. This guy, this source, talking to this destination, and he's never done that before. That comes from my network visibility. Having visibility at a network level, that just told me that that source never accessed that destination. I've also got a messages from my Windows server. So this happens to be a Windows server, and all of those Windows events are also being sent to my platform, which now gives me an event that says there's an RDP registry modification as well as a reverse tunnel. Things are getting a bit interesting, Steve. Here's the most interesting one. The platform also has threat intelligence feeds coming in. What does that do for me? That gives me in real time, anytime there's an emerging threat that happens in the industry, I'm being updated about it. So what I saw here is this source now connecting to this command and control reputation server, and it's been identified as an emerging threat. I can click on that and say, okay, what is that emerging threat? So let me go down here, and I've got an event, and I can validate that. Okay, that is an emerging threat. If I go through my interflow record, so what is my interflow record? Really quickly review. All of the data that comes into the platform gets converted into metadata. And it also gets enhanced with reputation information. This is important to convert it and normalize it, because all of those different tools that are part of the platform can now look for security threats in it. So what I've identified here is this reputation now happens to be Sunburst. So what did I do, right? I was able to now articulate and correlate and connect the dots here to say each one of those individual security events may have may have brought something to my attention, but didn't really call out that I've got a server that's been compromised. So you can clearly see I've got a server that's been compromised here, right? Now, what can I do? If I go back to that emerging thread here, what I want to do is, now that I've identified that this server has been compromised, I immediately want to go block it on my firewall. So from the same tool, I'm going to go to my firewall, that source IP, that where the emerging thread of the command and control session resides. I'm going to go ahead and for the next 5 hours, block that traffic until I figure out what's going on. As well as I'm going to go ahead and generate a trouble ticket or an email. So Steve, I was able to find all servers, the example I used here, all servers that had the SolarWinds software on it, and I was able to quickly identify that it was compromised, because now I have all of these dots connected to show me, yes, there was a compromised server that had a connection to a known command and control server. Steve?
That's great, Snehal. And I think that helps demonstrate the power of an integrated, consolidated platform. We got a couple of questions. I'm going to read them at the same time because they're kind of a two-parter. Can you talk about the threat intelligence? And that, I think that means how we bring in data feeds to help map to what we're seeing, and what info was provided to the ID to ID the activity of an emerging threat.
Sure, a couple of them. So our threat intelligence feeds brings in quite a few things. One is the reputation, the geolocation, signatures. The specific example I showed was the reputation. There were servers that were identified in the wild that were used as destinations for Sunburst, right? And our database got updated, and when we saw an internal asset trying to connect to one of those now known, which we updated our database, command and control servers, we were able to identify and generate that security event.
I think one thing you've got me thinking about, Snehal, is applications, right? I think this is the new normal. We used to look at infrastructure, then we looked at the platforms like IaaS, PaaS. Now we're looking at the actual apps. And I think people are reading a lot of news about ransomware affecting and getting in through the remote worker paradigm that we all now experience. What other apps can we see, or how would you help people on the call see that we can go into cloud-based email in particular to make sure we can help them with a remote worker strategy?
Yeah, we can. Again, Steve, we've got back into my collection. This is all about collecting data. So what I have are 8 connectors built in, which are grabbing data from your applications in the cloud. Here, for example, I've got Office 365, Google Suite, Azure Active Directory. So I'm going to authenticate against those, for example, mail applications, and then I will go ahead and pull all that data into our platform. Once I pull the data, I can apply all of those common security detections. And you can see under my threat hunting, I've got a threat hunting library. And here I can build dashboards for those various different tools. So you mentioned Office 365 or even G Suite. So if I go into G Suite, I've got a dashboard that gives me all of the relevant security events that has to do with Google Suite, as well as the raw events that I've extracted from there.
That's great, Snehal. Thanks a lot. And that's partly due to what? Let's play on that threat intel question. How are we doing that? How are we digging into the application itself? What makes our magic special?
So the magic is all in that flow record, right? So I'll review again. The magic is in this flow record as the data comes in, because the current issue we have is when you have siloed tools, each one of those data sets are different. When you take a look at your malware tool, detection tool, you look at a bunch of data there, it may visually look different and the format may be different. As we're bringing all of the data inside our platform, we're converting it into this common flow record, and we normalize it into the metadata fields. Not only are we normalizing and converting it into all of the common fields, we're also inserting things like the reputation. We're also inserting things like the geolocation. Geolocation is important because you have detections that also look for things like impossible travel anomaly. Let's take a look at a couple of those. So impossible travel is.
Let's do that.
Yeah. So this person, let's just say he logged in. You can see here, let's say Steve logs in from San Francisco, and then 5 minutes later he logs in from Russia. Well, that's impossible travel. And based on that threat intelligence feed that I've injected into my record, I'm able to see his original login from San Francisco and then his second login from Russia, right? And then I'm able to identify that it's impossible for him to travel. Here you can see this guy logged in from Virginia, and then he logged in from Frankfurt, and he traveled at 78,000 miles an hour. It's not possible. And 188 seconds later, he did that. Yeah. So that's the power of feeding in that additional threat intelligence data that allows me to have these additional detections.
Yeah, only Elon Musk can say he can do that, right? In one of his SpaceX crafts. So yeah, that's good, Snehal. We don't have any more questions on the chat board. So please, folks, we've got a few minutes left in the time. If you have any more questions, we're happy to entertain. Snehal, this whole idea of collect the right data from various sources, look for the detections using machine learning, investigating them to make sure they're real or to do further forensics before you take action, and then respond. I think it's unusual that we have all four of those on one platform. And you did show that you could use that response functionality to block the firewall traffic. What's another quick thing you can show people and how they can build, response workflows?
Yeah, absolutely. So a common question that'll come up always, Steve, is you just showed me how to identify a critical threat here. Let's just say I get up in the morning, or I walked away, went out for a walk for 15 minutes, come back, and I saw ransomware on my dashboard. Great. I can click on it. I can come in here, can immediately go to the firewall and block that traffic. Well, I do want to go for a walk, right? So I need to automate that. I need to automate it that if ransomware is identified in my network, I want you to take an action immediately. So here I can create a playbook. A playbook would consist of, one is a query. Look for something in my network. I got a critical server here. If the critical server talks outside of the US, I want you to alert me, and I don't want you to automatically go to the firewall and block it. Or I can take a template. Let's take that same ransomware example here. So now I found, let's say I've got a template here that says look for ransomware. I'm going to now look for ransomware every 5 minutes in my network. If I do find ransomware, the first and foremost thing is I want you to go to the firewall, just like I did manually, and block that traffic for the next 5 hours until I figure out what's going on. Go ahead and send an email to me. Even go to my dashboard and create a custom security event. If I see the user's been compromised, I'll even go to Active Directory and disable that user, as well as I can create custom responses. I can even send an API command or a put or a post, or even run a custom script on a server. So Steve, you can see here, I don't have to sit in front of my screen and look for ransomware to pop up. I can automate the whole thing by creating a playbook and take an action on any one of these actions if I do find ransomware in my network.
That's great, Snell. That's the power of what I think people expect from automation is rinse and repeat, right?
Yes.
Okay, we still don't have another question, but we have a few minutes left, folks, so jump in. I'll dial one in, Snehal, because I think it's important. We've shown a lot of power and capability, but at the same time, people have made investments in people and tools that they already trust. How do we actually work with existing tool sets that are in people's security operations environment?
Yeah, great question, Steve. So, I showed you a couple of things I can do. So to work with all of your existing tools is important, right? So one we did was we want to work with your existing firewalls. We want to get the logs from your firewall, all the logs, because firewall logs are very, very rich in terms of network traffic. I want to work with your Active Directory, so I want to get all the user information, as well as I want to go ahead and disable the user in Active Directory. Here's an important one. Most folks already have an EDR platform in their environment. So I want to have the ability, if I find ransomware on a particular server, maybe I just want to contain that server. So I can go to my EDR tool here, for example, CrowdStrike, and then say I want to contain that host. So we have a platform or a build that'll allow you to have integrations into your existing tools with APIs.
Fantastic. So we're not a rip and replace shop, in simple words. And I think that's key in today's economy. So I think it's about time to wrap it up, Snehal. I'll ask one more time for, we do have a question.
There's a question that came up, Steve, on
go ahead, read it. You can read it because you're right on top of it.
It says, this looks like a lot of work to bring in all of these logs. It actually isn't. We have a log forwarder. So when you want to send syslog messages over to us, you're simply pointing those syslogs we'll be the syslog server. So you go into your individual tools and say, where's your syslog server? You point it over to us. That's how easy it is for syslog. And then we'll go ahead and parse those appropriately. From a connector perspective, it's just as easy here. I can go in here. Let's just say we want Office 365, right, as a connector. So I click on it. I just give it a name here, go to next. And all I'm going to do is go ahead and plug in the keys in here, right? So this allows me to plug in all of my keys. Once I submit the keys, it'll go ahead and that's it. I click next and complete. It'll go ahead and authenticate against and pull those data back.
Just a clarification question. They're actually referring to mapping all the data elements.
Yeah, so mapping all of the data elements, as I showed you with the correlation, all happens on its own internally. So for us, we converted it into an interflow record.
Yeah, that's part of our what we call our data processing engine and our AI engine. And there's a lot of content on our website under products that explains how those tools those components work. But thanks for that clarification. Yeah, and just in general, Snehal, what is, there's always marketing and then there's reality. So I'll just tell the marketing part first, which is we have several case studies on the web where customers do talk about the rapid pace of onboarding and training. It's much easier. Some tools take 6 months to fully integrate and bring up to speed. We do that. And what would be your quotes, Snehal, for the record here? How quickly can people expect to turn it on and actually see some magic?
Not only my quote, but when I talk to all of our MSSP partners, nobody has said more than 2 weeks. They've always said it takes us 2 weeks to bring on a new customer. That goes from training, building the custom dashboards, and deploying all of these devices to collect all of the data.
And how about on the enterprise side?
On the enterprise, it's very similar. So you're looking at about, roughly from a 2 week to about 4 weeks on the enterprise side, because now you're having to go do a lot of that labor work on your own versus an MSSP partner doing all of the customizations of the dashboards and the reporting and all of that stuff for you. There's a little bit more learning curve from an enterprise perspective.
All right, super. All right, well, that's again, we're out of time officially. Let's do a last call for a remaining question if there is one. And thanks for all the questions so far, folks. We appreciate that. And Snehal, final words in case something pops up. I'll grab it. But final words for the call today. Again, just maybe summarize what are we looking at this year for ransomware in 2021? What's the big takeaways?
Yeah. The most important thing is correlation, Steve. We've all have a challenge of having a lot of logs come in, having individual point products tell us that there is a critical event for that particular data source, but to try to correlate that and come up and identify a critical asset that's been compromised is difficult. It's not, I should say, more than difficult, it takes us a long time. We've learned that can easily take you days to correlate from the different tools you have versus in our platform, you can do it within minutes.
Perfect. That's a great way to end the call. So thank you, Snehal, and thanks folks for showing up. Yep, and everybody will get a replay of the recording without registration. We'll send you an email with a link. You can just play it and go, forward it to your friends and colleagues. Thank you again. Stay in touch with the Stellar Cyber website for upcoming events. We're at quite a few virtual events, which you can see on the events tab. And obviously the webinars, there's always a webinar coming up from Stellar Cyber as well. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.